Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shana. Thanks for tuning in today. If you're just finding us for the first time, welcome. We hope that you'll stick around and find out how we can help you with your biblical stewardship. So we've all been given a responsibility to manage time, talent, and treasure that all belongs to the Lord. And one day we're going to answer for it. So our mission here at Financial Issues is twofold: to help defund darkness by helping you institute a biblically responsible investment strategy, and encouraging you to fund the light, to be joyful and generous givers with the resources that God has trusted you to manage. So speaking of stewardship, let's get right into a stewardship verse for today. It comes from Acts 5:29. But Peter and the disciple answered, "We must obey God rather than man." Sounds like we're really looking into the future, not only for what they were dealing with, but some things that, we have to deal with today and coming in the future. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, it's a good point, Shana. It actually reminds me of something that we talked about a little bit on Friday. You had referenced in your In the Know segment about the comparisons between America and Rome. And, I find it very interesting that the disciples were facing the same thing as we are facing. The interesting trajectory with Rome is that Rome began as pagan and ended as Christian. My fear for our country is that we begin as Christian and end as pagan, but I pray that that's not the outcome for us. When we realize who our ultimate allegiance is to, Shana, and Christians leading the fight in that, I believe that'll turn our country back around, absolutely. But, this verse refers to the Christian's ultimate allegiance, and when the commands of God come into conflict with the rule of human authority, we have to obey God, and we must disobey man. Now, this isn't in contrast with Romans 13. It's in line with it. We're called to submit to the ruling governors that are, over us insofar as they don't conflict with our submission to God, but we must obey God rather than men, Shana. And, the topic of governing authorities, I think, has been a recurring point in the last week or so, with the election coming up, as we may see a change in those authorities. One of those two choices, Shana, Donald Trump has recently marketed himself as sort of a cryptocurrency-friendly president. So I wanted to get to sort of our topic today, what to make of cryptocurrency. Shana, what do we make of cryptocurrency, and how does it kind of differ from more traditional forms of money, if you could even call them that?
Yeah. Well, I guess we should start with what is it. And interestingly enough, too, I think Biden has sort of positioned himself as crypto-friendly too on the announcements of that. So what is cryptocurrency? Well, cryptocurrency is a form of a digital asset. So it's not something tangible that you can actually put your hands on, but it operates or clears on a decentralized network, which explains why, government who is interested in having a lot of control is not interested in crypto, or not interested in people having free access to crypto. So it operates on a decentralized network, and that network is distributed across a large number of computers verifying transactions. So, I'm sorry, that's probably a very simplistic explanation of it, but that's what works for me. So the decentralized structure allows them to exist, these cryptocurrencies to exist outside of government control and central authorities. So do I see it as a currency? I really think it's kind of mislabeled. I don't know that it was intentionally mislabeled, but I don't think the name of it accurately describes what it is, at least right now. So I see it more as an asset class, which really correlates with risk assets rather than as a currency. So when I say it correlates with risk assets, you often see, if cryptocurrency is on the move either up or down, it usually is because the NASDAQ, which is a high risk asset, is doing something very similar.
Yeah, that's good. And Shana, what are the different types of cryptocurrency? I know we hear about Bitcoin a lot. There are other ones as well.
I think Bitcoin is probably the most popular. I think that's it was one of, if it wasn't the first, it was one of the first cryptocurrencies that are out there. It is the only cryptocurrency at this time. It may change in short order, but it's one of the only cryptocurrencies that you can actually buy in an ETF on an exchange. So, that is something that's really forced us to look at this more seriously.
Yeah. And Shana, could you speak to that for just a moment as well? Because, we have had a particular stance about cryptocurrency in our ministry's history, and you've spoken about it on occasion before. We have traditionally had a bit of a caution towards cryptocurrency. And could you just share with our listeners maybe why this is, and even if there are potentially some changes with sort of our stance to it also, and maybe what could make it a potentially dangerous investment as well? There are a lot of questions in there.
Yeah. For the average person, I would say cryptocurrency is a really complex strategy to understand. Up until what just recently happened with the creation of ETFs, in order to buy cryptocurrency, you had to go through a series of steps. There's different ways that you can own it. There's a lot of opportunity for fraud and crime in the crypto network. Now, crime doesn't just happen on crypto. People launder cash and launder money all the time. So it's not just exclusive to cryptocurrency, but, like a lot of these, what do you call it? The cyber attacks where they've, and help me out with the name is escaping me at the time, but whenever they tell you that you have to pay so much money in order to get,
almost like hold you for ransom, kind of.
Yeah, ransomware. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Okay, so all of these ransomware attacks, is a lot of them want to be paid in cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
So that has been a real problem, and then you have drug dealers and money launderers and all using this cryptocurrency network. So that has been a caution of ours, but there's a real there's so much cryptocurrency that gets stolen or different things like that. So you really have to. There's been a lot of reason for us to have caution in and around cryptocurrency.
Yeah. And where would you maybe encourage our listeners to invest outside of cryptocurrency, and why?
Well, cryptocurrency has been a big movement, but there's a lot that goes into it. Just like when we talk about AI, NVIDIA is not the only company that's going to benefit or increase in value because of AI. There's so many ancillary things. So, you can invest in companies that are part of the blockchain that provide technology, some of the cybersecurity companies, so on and so forth. So, there's ancillary ways of benefiting from the trend in cryptocurrency without actually having to buy currency itself. And now, of course, not that I'm recommending it, but there's the ETF, which is going to make it a lot easier for a lot more people to get into it. And, it's also for people who have given discretionary authority over their investments to their financial advisors, which is very common practice. It's the way that we operate in our practice is we have discretionary authority. We know our customer, but we build a portfolio and we decide what goes into it. So there's a lot of people that may not make a conscious decision to own crypto, but they may start seeing these crypto ETFs show up in their portfolios.
Yeah, that's good. Last question, Shana. This is a big one, connecting it spiritually. A lot of people will connect cryptocurrency to this idea of the one world currency from the book of Revelation, of course. We talk about that on the show sometimes. Could you speak to this for a moment and what this could mean for us both financially and spiritually?
Yeah. And of course, I'm not a Bible scholar. I love the Lord Jesus and I read his word and study his word on a regular basis. But, the book of Revelation is something that has always intimidated me a bit. There's so many prophecies in Revelation. There are so many things. I guess it's kind of like the Old Testament. They weren't Christians, I guess, but the Old Testament people reading the revelations that were in the Old Testament that hadn't been fulfilled yet by Jesus, and it's very cryptic. So, but I think one of the things that most people agree on is that there is going to be a one world government at one time. That is probably a one world government is probably going to necessarily have to have a one world currency, and I think that the thought in the Christian realm is that, well, cryptocurrency might give me a way to avoid some of the things that the scripture says is going to happen. But, I think the scripture is very clear that at some point in time, if we're alive during those times, we're going to have to make a decision. If we want to buy or sell, we're going to have to take the mark of the beast. So, is this interest in cryptocurrency really a way for us to think that we are going to exercise sovereignty over a sovereign God. If God says that we're either going to have to take the mark of the beast or not be able to buy or sell, I don't think cryptocurrency is going to be the answer for that. So, we're taking a look at it. We follow it on a much more practical basis, but again, same thing with our stance on gold. It's an asset class. It's an investment. I don't think it can really be taken seriously as a currency either. Well, folks, we're going to take a break. We hope that helped you answer some questions that you may have about cryptocurrency. Stay tuned, because we're going to come back with more financial issues right after this break.
When I took the test, I knew that I had other options. I was really scared. I know that it's really easy to get an abortion in New York. I've been down the other road before, and it really was a negative experience for me. And it felt like I did it because it made things easier for my partner at the time. And this time I thought, I think I want a different story. I'm just really scared. And she said, we'll take it a page at a time. It felt scary, but it felt like a good thing. I'm gonna have to, if I have this baby, I'm gonna have to do it alone, and that's gonna be really challenging. But I wanted to do it. But I knew that I needed help, and to get around people that would help me, not people who would say, this is a problem that we can make go away. More like, this is awesome, and we can help you make it more awesome.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. We're so glad that you are sticking with us today. Hey, one of our missions is to give you a biblically responsible investment strategy. And as part of that strategy, we will issue sell alerts if a company is doing things that make them no longer biblically responsible. If they're getting engaged in the issue of abortion, the LGBTQ agenda, they start committing human rights violations, or anti-family entertainment, so many things like that, pornography. If companies are involved in that, and we're seeing, we have been seeing a trend of more and more companies going woke and getting really kind of coerced into supporting these agendas. Luckily, we're seeing a reversal in that trend. So good job. Thank you to those of you who have been praying for this and continue praying, because it's really the prayer of the righteous that availeth much. But something else that I'm hoping that can availeth much is the petitions that we do here at Financial Issues. So we do have two. They're not really petitions asking a company to stop doing something or reprimanding them for doing what they're doing, and forcing their shareholders to get engaged with agendas that are contrary to their Christian beliefs. But we're actually sending a letter of encouragement to two companies. John Deere and Tractor Supply have done an about face in their the woke agenda that they were pursuing. So we want to come together as a community of believers and tell them, hey, great job. Thank you for, if I own this company, thank you for not making me support the LGBTQ agenda. Thank you for not using my money to force diversity, equity, and inclusion garbage on your employees. And thank you for just returning to a commitment to pursue excellence in business and just doing well what you do and staying out of the culture war. Thank you for that. So sign our petition. You've only got a couple of days left to do that. The deadline is this Thursday, July the 25th. So we want to have as many names as possible on those letters. This is a great opportunity to encourage these companies in corporate America to have some backbone, to stand the line, to stand up and say, hey, we're just going to make farm stuff. Hey, we're just going to make tractors. We're not going to get into the social war.
Yep. And evidently pressure cookers that I found out as well, Shana. Tractor Supply sells those.
Do they?
They do.
Canners. And, yeah, they
canners. There you go.
My husband makes a trip there about at least once a week. So.
That's good. Good stuff. Yes, sign that. What do you think, Shana? You get some partner questions here?
Let's do it.
All right. John is up first. John is asking, regarding two tech companies that split, how are the fund owners affected if one or both tech companies are in an ETF or mutual fund and they split or reverse split? I just want to understand how the nuts and bolts works in an ETF or a mutual fund. Blessings to you guys, 63 years old. What do you think, Shana?
Good question, John. So it works much the same as it does for an individual investor. So when a company does a split, whether it's a 10-for-1 or a 1-for-10 split, which is a reverse split, the transaction is really value neutral at the time that it happens. So let's say that you have 100 shares of stock that is $10 a share, and it splits 10-for-1. Well, now you're going to have 1,000 shares at the same value because the price is going to decrease by the same ratio that the shares increase. So it's really a value neutral transaction at the time that it happens, whether the shares are owned by an individual or an institution or a mutual fund or an ETF. The same thing happens across the board.
Great stuff, Shana. Next one up is Stefan. He's got two questions for us. We'll do the first one first. On Thursday's show, so this was last week, he said, Shana, you discussed rental properties, their features and faults in some detail, including your own experience. A few years ago, a real estate agent suggested we purchase high-yield REITs in place of properties to avoid typical landlord headaches. One example is the abuse of service animal access laws to skirt landlord pet prohibitions. Shana, you'd mentioned some other landlord headaches or potential headaches as well. What are your thoughts on this for Stefan? He's 53.
Yeah, well, that's one that I haven't actually had any experience with, but we do see this quite a bit. We have in kind of a different context. We have a local festival that we do every year, and during that festival, we don't allow animals in because it's an outdoor event, and you've got these animals, running around, and they can really they can mess in the places, and if they don't clean up after them, that's really inconvenient. Or you might be held responsible if somebody's dog bites somebody and bites a child or something like that. But one of the things that they've said there is, well, this is my emotional support dog or my emotional support pet or whatever. So yeah, I could see how that would be. Personally, we will allow our tenants to have pets, but we're going to charge them because, if they're going to come in the house, they're going to do something to the house that you're, as a landlord, are going to have to fix. So yeah. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I can't really give legal advice about what to do about it. But if I'm an owner of a property and I don't want people having pets inside my house, then I'm going to say that you have to do a pet deposit, and maybe it's $500 or $1,000 or whatever, and we'll see how committed they are to their emotional support animal at that point, I guess.
That's right.
But
I've actually seen emotional support crocodiles, I think, before.
Oh, my goodness.
Interesting stuff, but people do crazy things.
They're eating people out in Florida.
That's right. It's nuts. But no, that's good stuff there, Shana. Stefan's next question is, I have there's a lot of conversation centering on the stock market's alternating rise and leveling when current economic indicators would point to a serious downturn. In real terms, given the real, not nominal price rises from the past 2 years, has the market really performed as well as the numbers on paper indicate? Good question.
I think so. So, yeah, I mean, that's just part, increases and decreases, the market going up, the market going down. That's just part of the normal business cycle. It's just, you can go and look at a chart for the history as far back as you can go, and you're going to see the ups and the downs in it. But so, yeah, like over the last 2 years, the S&P 500 is up 40%. Inflation over that same time period, I don't have the exact figures, but, inflation's probably up less than half of that. So that is real return. So, the S&P index from March of 22 to June of 2023, not counting dividends, now that time period was sort of flattish. So, when you think about the markets and you think about long-term returns, the market doesn't ever typically go straight up or straight down. It's a very bumpy ride, but the more, and that's why we take a long-term approach to it, because if you look at a chart, the more you back out, the more time you get in there, you start to see less of the drastic ups and downs. And what you tend to see is that volatility flatten out when you own it over a long period of time.
Good stuff, Shana. Next one is Alan. Alan was listening to a recent program we had on estate planning, and he has a couple questions related to that. He has a life insurance policy, named his trust as the beneficiary. I think I heard he says that life insurance is not taxed, and I was wondering if I've done the right thing or if I should name my wife first, then my 2 daughters as the second beneficiaries, 71 years old. What advice do you have for Alan, Shana?
Yeah, so I think what Alan is hearing is correct. Life insurance proceeds are not subject to income tax. Now, they could be subject to estate tax, but, unless your estate is over $27 million, you probably don't have anything to worry about in the structure of your life insurance policy. So it really just depends on what your trust says. Do you have a pretty simple situation where it's just you and your spouse and kids that you share, and your wishes are just that your spouse gets full use and then it gets passed on to your kids? You're probably fine. The reason that you may have a trust, maybe you have some special provisions or maybe some restrictions on distributions beyond beyond your spouse. Maybe you have a spendthrift child, or a child that struggles with addiction, or a special needs child where you want to set up some guardrails and some provisions for that. Then it's really better for the trust to get it. So it really depends on what your trust says. You're probably just fine though. But I would encourage you to talk about that in regards to your personal situation with the attorney that has set that up for you. So. A way of, if you have kingdom beneficiaries and maybe you haven't included them in the trust, and you have an IRA, there's still a provision where you can be tax efficient there and earmark some of your IRA assets for your kingdom beneficiaries without having to go in and make changes to the trust.
Good stuff. Thanks for that, Shana. Steve is up next. Steve purchased a specific stock when it was on the buy list. It's now gone private. He can't seem to sell the stock in his brokerage account. It has had a market value of about $2,600. What are his options to cash out that stock?
Well, we issued a sell alert for that company on March the 4th of this year. So I don't know what to tell you. If you didn't sell it at that point in time, it has been taken private. It was delisted in June. I would think that you should have gotten cash for your shares. So I'm a little bit puzzled as to why it's still showing up in your brokerage account. So I really would just encourage you to contact your brokerage account and ask them what the options are.
Good stuff. Last one here for the day, probably we'll have time for, Shana, is Peter. Peter's new partner this month chose the asset allocation model called the Timothy Plan, ages 20 to 45. Opened a Timothy Plan account directly. Could you explain why you've recommended both ETFs and mutual funds when the mutual funds already have ETFs in their makeup/sector weighting? I'm not sure why I should buy all 10 of these positions, especially since the Timothy account application only offers space for 5 tickers. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that there's only place for 5 tickers is not a problem. You can add an additional page if you want to get more than 5 funds, but you also need to be aware that you can't buy the ETFs if you're setting up directly at Timothy. If you're setting up with the Timothy plan there, mutual fund company, you only can buy the mutual funds there. You have to have a brokerage account to buy the ETF. So yes, it is true that some of the Timothy plan funds do own the ETFs. You can find that by just going and look at a fact sheet. You can see what the holdings are. You can see what ETFs are in there. So you can eliminate the ETFs from your strategy if you'd like and just do the mutual funds, but you'll just need to figure out what the comparable funds are for the ETFs that are listed there. Well, folks, if you're listening on a version of an outlet that only carries the short version of the show, we've got to wish you a farewell. We hope that you'll find the full version by going to Financial Issues. Through the ministry of Preborn, the Financial Issues family has saved tens of thousands of lives of babies. What an amazing job that God has done through you, the Financial Issues family. Would you join us in saving the lives of babies? What an amazing reunion we will have in glory, meeting all the people that we have saved. Please go to preborn.org, that is preborn.org, or financialissues.org, and click on the Preborn banner.
Samuel Case, news anchor with FISM News, sits down to read real comments from real viewers.
All righty, let's see, a bigger one here from Spectrum Nomad. That's a fancy name. Finally, a non-biased news source that tells everything how it is without having to push their opinion. It's not necessarily true we're not biased. We are Christian, we are conservative, but you're totally right that we don't try to push our own opinions or commentary in the story. So it's really great to hear that you're picking up on that.
Today, it's easy to get caught up in the rush and forget about what really matters. But when it comes to your money, are you making decisions that truly reflect your values? Too often, we invest in stocks without knowing what they stand for. What if your money could speak for what you believe in? Imagine following an investment strategy that recommends companies that don't support the things that break the heart of the Lord. A steadfast strategy, never wavering from biblical truth. When your investments align with your values, your money speaks for you. Let your money do the talking. Invest in what matters to you. Because biblical values matter, even when investing. Visit financialissues.org to learn more. That's financialissues.org.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. We're so glad that you've stuck around to hear more about the financial issues that we help you with, that we put stewardship as one of the main priorities of this ministry, and estate planning is a topic that is very crucial to stewardship. We think of estate planning as sort of as our final act of stewardship because, once we stop breathing, we don't have any control over the assets that we were managing. So we have to be a little bit forward-looking and think about and pray about and ask the Lord what he wants us to do with his stuff when we don't need it anymore. So we often discuss, and Jason and I have been discussing the things that people need to consider with estate planning. And to continue the conversation, I've invited my friend Jason MacDowell back to visit with us today about how we approach estate planning in practice. So, Jason, thanks for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Well, all right, let's kind of go through some of the checklist items. There's wills, there's trust. We talked a little bit about that last week. There's powers of attorney, there's medical directives. And, to be clear, neither Jason nor I or legal professionals, we don't have any legal licenses. We're not trying to give you legal advice, but we're just trying to lead you and guide you into obtaining some services that you really need to do proper planning. So before you even go to meet with a legal professional, you need to have a really good idea of what you want to happen and what you want to accomplish there. So some of the things that you need to consider is, and Jason and I go through and ask our clients this every annual meeting, do you have a will? Do you have a trust? If so, what do they say? Can you tell me in your own words what you want to see happen? Because that's the most important thing, is that you're able to convey what you want to happen. And then it's the legal professional's job to make sure that what you want to happen will happen by preparing the appropriate legal documents. So there's powers of attorneys, medical directives. Those are all a whole lot of things that you need to think about. But let's kind of go through one by one. So one of the things that you can, the first steps is either do I do a will or a trust? We've kind of already talked about the pros and cons of that. But when you do a will or a trust, one of the reasons that you want to do that is maybe you want to set up some restrictions on the timing and the use of the funds that you pass on, especially if you have a blended family. Maybe you husband and wife each have separate children, and that becomes a little bit more of a complex issue. So, wills can allow you to set up restrictions on the timing and use of money. So can trust. So the way that wills do this is with what's called a testamentary trust. So Jason, first let's talk about this. What is a testamentary trust?
Yeah, a testamentary trust is just a trust that is established in accordance with the instructions contained within the will. It's simple as that. Of course, it happens at death of the individual, and then the will dictates that a trust is created and has specific language in it. The trust can name minors with language specifying distributions at certain age. So the family dynamics situation that we talked about in past and even now can be beneficial there.
That's a really good point that you bring up there, because, a lot of people don't realize that, minors can't directly inherit money. So what happens if you didn't make some provision for who controls the money? And you think it's just, it's going to go to my kids. That's what everybody says, right? It's going to go to my kids. So what happens if you fail to plan in that way?
As it states, if you have the will and the testamentary trust, it's just going to be divided based off the language that's in there. So most likely what we see commonly in that situation, if you don't have any specific changes, then it will probably just be split evenly. And then, of course, it'll be all at the same time. So there might be a situation in the family dynamics that you want to wait on certain ones, whether it's adult children. It can be a blend of all kinds of different situations with children, whether adult children or minor children as well.
Yeah, good. And what about maybe a disadvantage of a testamentary trust versus maybe like a regular trust?
I'm glad we're going over this, because this is a good point. The disadvantage of the testamentary trust, though, is that it does not avoid probate, and it makes sense. You know why? Because the will dictates to probate court what to do. So that legal document says, hey, make a trust, but it still is subject to probate court. So where we talked about the living trust that's created while you're living, it's revocable, it can be changed. That's made before the individual, has passed. That's a benefit there. Whereas with this situation specifically, it will be subject to probate court too. So it's a very it's a disadvantage.
Good point. So there's some cost to doing all of this. Whether you do it ahead of time, it's probably cheaper to get a will than it is to get a trust. But then the probate, to probate a will, it actually costs money. So you're going to run into some cost at some point. But you just want to make sure that you have exercise the input that you feel is important. So, death is one thing. That's what really triggers the wheels to go into motion on probating a will or processing a trust. But what about incapacitation? What if you get into a car accident and you're in a coma? What if you have an illness that leaves you incapacitated? What if you have cognitive decline? I don't know that we know anybody that has that, but let's just say that you're a very important person and making decisions and you start to sort of lose it. What happens at that point? What can you do to plan for that?
Yeah, so there's a legal document called powers of attorney. So when talking about a simple will package, when you go to your legal advisor or your attorney that's going to put things together, you ask about a will, a power of attorney, and then medical directive. I'll touch on that last piece very last, but what we're going to talk about is powers of attorney. It's a legal document through which, as a principal, names someone to have the authority to make decisions and take actions on your behalf. It's only valid while you're alive. So say your spouse is your power of attorney. Well, it's only going to work while you're still alive. But incapacitation is where they can make decisions for you where you cannot. So you don't have to be an attorney to be the power of attorney over your spouse. That's another point we have to make as well. It can be an individual.
That's a good point, because we talk about this, and as many years as I've been in practice, we've had experience with these things coming up and actually happening. So let's just say that you have a husband and wife, and let's say the majority of the assets are in the husband's IRA account. Well, an IRA account by law can only have one owner. That's the husband. So what happens if there's an accident or the husband's in a coma or something like that, and the wife needs to make a distribution, to pay bills or to, provide some care for the husband, and she calls us and she says, hey, my husband's in the hospital and this is what we need. Well, as much as we would want to help, we would have to say, well, we have to have his signature. And if he's not able or in the state of mind to give a signature, then we have to have some other kind of documentation that authorizes. That's the last thing you want to have to tell somebody when they're in that kind of situation. So one of the things that you can do to plan for that is to have a power of attorney, because there's, the financial power of attorney, what are some of the things, just to kind of get people thinking, what are some of the kind of things that you need that for?
Yeah, so some of the key uses with power of attorney, and I want to make note of the durable versus regular. Durable extends the power of attorney once an individual becomes incapacitation. So that's where we would see most commonly. There's a regular version where it stops at incapacitation. I would say that's more of a disadvantage. So the durable makes more sense, and we see more commonly in the practice, of course. But one of the key uses is the financial power of attorney, which is part of that legal document that the power of attorney grants to the person that is chosen. And now in the situation, in the practice, what we have is if we have the power of attorney document and it is the spouse in your example, then the wife or the spouse that's not incapacitated can come to us with those documents and we can have it processed so that there is proper permission on that IRA for a distribution that we can take. Otherwise, our hands are tied. Even though we know the spouse, we know the family situation. Personally, legally, we as licensed advisors won't be able to do anything unless we have that power of attorney legal document and then process correctly. So that's why it's very important to have set up ahead of time when you're working with pretty much anybody in the financial field.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we just got about a minute left, but before we have to go, talk about, we spend a lot of time talking to real people, regular people in these situations about their real life situations. So what are the most common things that we see whenever we're talking about powers of attorney, medical directive, so on and so forth?
Yeah, with medical directive, that's the third part of it. It's where you're incapacitated and there's sort of a best wish for the medical decisions while in the hospital. But as far as what we see in the practice more commonly is power of attorney being spouses on each other and then having a contingent, maybe a child on the end. The medical directive can mimic the POA, so you make the same person your medical directive as your power of attorney as well. And then
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you had another thought to share, but you know what? Maybe we can pick up on some of this next week. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in today and joining us. We hope that we've given you some things to think about, because remember, estate planning is your final act of stewardship. And so we should take this just as seriously as we do all of our other stewardship decisions. Well, we hope that you're going to hang around, because we've got a little bit more to bring to you today on financial issues. You can find out more about the Ministry of Financial Issues at financialissues.org.
In a world where financial decisions can feel overwhelming, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. But what if there is a way to align your financial goals with your deepest values? Financial Issues has helped us navigate the complex world of finance through a biblical lens. By prioritizing and investing in a way that honors God, Financial Issues has empowered us to focus on what truly matters: our family, our faith, and our future. With Financial Issues by our side, we can invest knowing that our financial decisions are in line with our values. Take the first step today and become a Financial Issues partner to access rich online resources, training tools, and guidance for biblically responsible investing. Head over to financialissues.org and learn how to invest your money in a way that honors God. That's financialissues.org.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. Good to be here with you today. Hope you've enjoyed the show so far on this Monday, July 22nd. I was about to say April 22nd. I don't know what I was thinking there, but it is, in fact, July, and we're here with you live this morning. Good to be here with you all. Let's get to the markets. I know some of you, Royce was asking, wondering to see how the markets might react to the big announcement over the weekend of Dems changing from from one basket case to the other. Royce, let's check it out right now, brother, and see what they are doing. Evidently, the markets seem to be responding pretty positively right now, though I'm curious to know whether or not that's because of the Democrats ousting Joe Biden, or if it's more because of a continuation of our tech rally we've been seeing. I think it's more the latter. Right now, the Dow Jones is up about 0.1%. The S&P 500 up over 1% as we start, and the NASDAQ up a whopping 1.6 percentage points as we begin the final full week of the month of July. Comes off somewhat of a chaotic week, folks. We saw one of the largest IT outages in world history on Friday at Microsoft, actually. And so by the end of the day, Friday, it was rather a down day. The Dow finished just below 1 percentage, so just slightly less than negative 1 percentage point. The S&P 500 was down about 0.75%, and the NASDAQ about 4/5. It's actually the worst week for the major indices since the springtime. So that's what we're looking like at the markets here, folks. Let's take a look at what oil is doing. Oil right around $79.50 a barrel. U.S. Treasury yields right around 4.22%. So, of course, we did see that big news from the Democrat Party that Joe Biden has indeed decided to not run in the 2024 race. However, he is, according to him at least, going to finish out his term as president. Now, I want you folks to remember something. About 3 years ago it was, Dan Celia predicted this, or at least something very much like it. Dan's prediction was that this would happen a little bit earlier than it did, but nonetheless happened almost exactly like he said it would. It seems in all likelihood like Kamala Harris will be the one to take the mantle, as it were, for the Democratic Party. Of course, we'll have to see later on this week, I believe, is when the DNC is meeting. But you know what, folks? It doesn't really change overall what's happening here, because I think we've all known what's happening, that it's still one group of political leaders who are pulling the strings, whether it's Biden or someone else. It's the same group. It's the same group. So it's not going to change a whole lot, though it may change Trump's strategy, I'm sure. Let's get to the ag report here, folks. And we got a couple other things to get to before we sign off for the show. I do want to remind you, please pray for Craig Haugaard. Tomorrow he has a follow-up surgery, so please keep him in prayer. It's a bit of a major surgery. It's nothing scary or life-threatening, but it is something that's pretty important. So please do keep him in prayer. But here is today's ag report with Craig Haugaard.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for July 22nd. Corn futures posted the lowest volume session in 2 weeks as traders just couldn't find a new story to trade. At the close, December corn was 0.25% lower at 404 3/4. Soybeans saw a two-sided trade, but ultimately sufficient moisture in the 15-day forecast and really unexceptional export demand for U.S. beans drove the market direction. As a result, November bean futures settled down 7 cents lower at $10.36 per bushel. French wheat ratings dropped sharply, which caused wheat markets around the world to see a round of short covering. The French crop dropped by 5 points to now be rated at 52% good to excellent. That is its lowest rating in 8 years. At the close, Minneapolis September wheat was 9 1/4 cents higher at 609 3/4. Kansas City rose by 7 1/4 cents to close at 570, and Chicago was 7 1/2 cents higher at 542 3/4. Cotton futures came under pressure as a result of crude oil being down $2.69 per barrel. Now, you may wonder why crude oil impacts cotton. Well, it is a result of synthetic fiber markets. When crude oil is cheaper, it makes synthetic fiber also cheaper to produce, and that in turn impacts cotton prices. Friday's close had December futures 123 points lower at 70.70. Livestock futures were mixed. October live cattle were 45 cents higher at $183.47 1/2 per hundredweight. September feeder cattle were $1.22 1/2 lower as they settled at $256.77 1/2 per hundred. Now, the only surprise in the monthly cattle on feed report came in the placements number, which was 93% of last year versus the expected 97%. In wet October lean hog futures finishing 52 1/2 stronger for the day as they ended the session at 74.55. Class 3 milk futures gave back roughly the previous day's gain. Class 3 milk futures gave back roughly half of the previous day's gains. At the closing bell, August futures were down 19 points at 19.98. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
Thank you all for those prayers for Craig. Hope you enjoyed the ag report there, folks. This week in the economy, not too much of note to report. There's a couple things I wanted to point out. Nothing much today. Tomorrow we get existing home sales. Wednesday we'll get new home sales. And then Thursday we get the GDP growth rate. We also get initial jobless claims, and we'll get durable goods orders, as well as a couple other numbers there that'll break before we go live for the show. Then Friday we get personal income, personal spending, PCE index, core PCE. Earnings season also is in full swing, though this week tends to be a bit of a smaller week, not a lot. Verizon is reporting earnings today. Tomorrow we get, really, I'd say tomorrow is probably the big day. We get Alphabet, that's Google's parent company. We also get Tesla and Coca-Cola. The rest of the week, not a whole lot of note to report there in earnings season. But we'll see earnings season ramp up in a couple weeks there with some of those big heavy hitters. And of course, we do get a couple of those tomorrow. I did want to remind you all, please do pray for one of our brothers in the chat. Royce from Ohio has a CT scan I believe it's sometime today, he said, later on in the day. So just prayers that would go well. Royce, I know you were in an accident several weeks ago, I think it was. So just wanted to ask you all if you would pray for Royce for complete healing for him. I appreciate you and all of you joining in the chat today. So thank you so much. Grant, let's get to a couple of these comments here before the end of the show, shall we?
Yeah, and talking about prayer, we have Kara Lee saying, we have been praying for Josiah and y'all, Seth. Just checking in to see how it all went.
Carly, thank you for those prayers. I appreciate that so much. So we were supposed to have an initial meeting with the hospital. I think it was like maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And then sure enough, Josiah came down with a fever that day, so we had to reschedule it. He's doing really well. His fever, his fever is gone. His hernia is obviously still there, but I don't know if hernias can heal naturally, but I'm praying for it too. But we're just still trying to figure out, getting things set with the hospital, getting a surgery date, that sort of thing. There's a lot of I don't know if it's red tape or different things you have to go through for that. But yeah, I would appreciate continued prayers for him especially. He is a little trooper. He was just a delight this morning before I left for work. So thank you for those prayers, Carolee. That's awesome. What else do we got there, Grant?
We have a comment from John, upset that we at FISM have to carry all the Christians not doing BRI.
John, I get it. Yeah, this is one I wanted to address. I think it was from late last week. I appreciate your comment, man. And let me just say a few more words about this. It is unfortunate, brother. I agree with you that not more Christians are doing biblically responsible investing. And they kind of fall into the trap of what we hear, this generic faith-based investing. I'm not trying to, dunk on faith-based investing, but I do think that a lot of it is kind of just almost a lazy man's version of trying to be biblically responsible, where they'll say, yeah, this is Christian, but it isn't really, because people aren't doing the research to look in to see what their companies, as well as their ETFs and mutual funds and other things, actually support. So I share that frustration with you, brother. That in mind, let me encourage you with a few thoughts also. First, John, here's first. The soil is ripe for harvest. So this is the time to get the word out about biblically responsible investing. We've been seeing several big corporations turning their backs on the DEI nonsense. Tractor Supply, John Deere. We even saw last week Microsoft nixed its DEI department. Microsoft is not biblically responsible, but we're seeing movement in a positive direction, even from these big, gigantic companies. I think it's really good. People are starting to think seriously about this stuff, and we need to ride this wave. We can't just stand back on the sidelines and cheer. We need to ride this wave and get involved and do what we're doing with, for example, with the petitions that we have right now, which you all have just knocked these out of the park. It's fantastic. We've got hundreds and hundreds of signatures on both of these petitions. That's what we're trying to do. We need to get the word out about biblically responsible investing. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for people who maybe don't really know much about biblically responsible investing to hear about it. People who are Christians, people who know the gospel, they love Christ, but they don't really know what to do with their money. Now's our chance. Now's our chance. And so we need to take that opportunity by spreading the word, John. I think that's first. Second, it may seem like we are alone, but I can promise you we're not. We get hundreds of thousands of people who listen to this show. The Financial Issues family is large. Thousands of you support the ministry. Timothy Plan stands with us. Preborn stands with us. There's a growing army of conservative Christians who are sick and tired of the nonsense and who want to please God with their money. And I think it's important to remember that it may feel like we're alone, but trust me, we're not. And then lastly, I think this is most important, John, we need to consider what an honor it is to carry the torch of BRI investing. Because here's the deal, you are right. Ministries like Financial Issues and Preborn, we're kind of the only ones doing it. I mean, there are some others out there, but we are the ones carrying the torch. That's not a burden, that's an honor. That's an honor to be able to lead the way among our brothers and sisters in Christ. So if we have to carry it a little bit, I'd encourage you to wear that as a badge of honor. That the Lord has given you all an opportunity to set an example for the believers in how to manage our money in a way that honors God. And John, I can promise you this, God's not going to forget it. He is not going to forget it. He's going to bless your faithfulness, not just for standing strong in the culture, but also for standing strong in leadership within the church. So consider it an honor. I think it's a really good thing. It's a great point you make there, John, and I hope it can be of an encouragement to all of you to keep on fighting. We're seeing some good things happening here, folks. We need to keep this wave moving. Remember, all that you have belongs to the Lord. It was a great show. Happy to be with you all. We'll do it again tomorrow, God willing. It's all His. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with what God has given to us. God bless you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
If
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.